Shabbat shalom, everyone. I just returned from Israel yesterday, and I've now served as a delegate from Merkaz Olami, the Zionist arm of the conservative movement, twice. Once in 2015, I was a delegate at the 37th World Zionist Congress, and again last week, I was a delegate at the 39th World Zionist Congress. The same institution, which was established by Theodor Herzl in 1897, I always show up and imagine that as each delegate shows up, her or his name is engraved with heavenly fire on an eternal Zionist scroll. But instead, we receive a printed badge and a plastic pen. It's easy to walk into the World Zionist Congress and nerd out in the details of delegate counts, the ratio of men and women, the ratio of older 35 and under 35, representing America versus representing Israel versus representing the rest of the world. And I think it's crucial also that we all take a step away to gain greater perspective from the granular details and appreciate the grand values that are celebrated during the Congress. Zionism has always required our youth to play an active role. Often it's considered a youth movement. Zionism has always championed women's rights. Women were elected to the Second Zionist Congress in Switzerland and allowed to vote in the Zionist Congress in Switzerland in 1898, more than 7 decades before women were allowed to vote in Switzerland in the year 1971. The Congress of the Jewish People boasts a set of values that the Jewish people should take enormous pride in. Standing in that hall brought together a group of people from around the world undeterred from identifying publicly as Zionists. After 2 years of protests and attacks on the word and the idea, the gathering reaffirmed the beautiful concept of Zionism and the notion that we alone ought to determine and define what that word means. During the week of reading Lech-Lecha, in which God commands Abraham, the first Jew, to journey to the Promised Land, could there be a more meaningful, symbolic gesture than Jews traveling from the 4 corners of the earth to the land of Israel to continue to chart the next chapter of Abraham's journey? Our journey that began with Abraham is one that's set through values and through politicking. We started in a good place thanks to all of you and people like ourselves, congregations like ourselves who voted. In the election cycle last year, our Merkaz Olami delegation was the one that grew by the largest margin of all of the parties in our liberal bloc, growing from 35 delegates in the last Congress to 39 delegates in this one, comprised of 19 from the US and 20 from around the world. We met as a delegation for 2 days on Sunday and Monday for strategy sessions to reflect on the success of the previous election process, consider challenges ahead, and learn about the committee work that was about to unfold for each of us. We met in historic rooms, like the one where the first Knesset met, and the conference room in the new Knesset Museum, which, by the way, is excellent. I highly recommend all of us visiting the Knesset Museum. We probably will on our next visit to Israel in January. As I explained in the video, I was assigned to Committee 7, Combating Global Anti-Semitism, along with other Merkaz delegates, Rabbi Steve Warnick, the senior rabbi of Beth Tzedek in Toronto, the previous CEO of United Synagogue of Conservative Movement, and also with Dr. Shuli Rubin Schwartz, Chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. Our bloc partners were Atzenu, represented by the Reform Movement's Rabbi Yossi Zweibeck from up the hill at Stephen Wise, and Rabbi Joshua Davidson, Senior Rabbi of Temple Emmanuel in New York City, amongst others. There were 9 or so other committees as well, all meeting during the conference. There's a degree to which the entire Congress feels a little bit like kabuki theater, like Model UN, for those of us who engaged in it as high schoolers. Meaning to say that we lobbied and postured and passed resolutions, such as supporting the formation of a state commission of inquiry into the events of October 7th, or demanding the refurbishment, access, and funding for the egalitarian side of the Western Wall, the Kotel Plaza, and or advocating for a mandatory draft bill for all Israeli citizens, including the Haredi. All three of those measures passed the plenary. It was thrilling to see the Congress of the Jewish people confirm those ideas, our ideas, had wide-ranging support. And while that's true, that they all passed, there is a voice in my head that asks, what kind of performative theater is this? And it's a voice that speaks English with a thick Israeli accent. Thank goodness, Israel is now a state and maintains its own democratically elected government. And that government is the only one which can enforce and implement the ideas passed at the Congress. Even if these resolutions are meant to encourage prioritization and funding from the national institutions, which is what it's supposed to do. That's the point of the entire World Zionist Congress. Issues like the draft and state inquiry commission, and debatably even the Kotel, are really decided by the state ministers and the members of the Knesset, the parliament themselves. While the ceremonial conference plays out in front of the theater, behind the curtain, the coalition agreements are being negotiated that will determine which parties' representatives run which posts at the Israeli national institutions, what size budgets they receive as a sign of influence, and which parties will receive board seats to make up the boards of the Israeli national institutions. This agreement dictates the direction of these institutions for the next 5 years. We all know the Merkaz Masorti conservative movement's Dr. Yitzhar Hess, the current vice chair of the World Zionist Organization, where I'm proud to say he will remain in that position for the next term as well. We all hope that our leaders could produce an agreement that would be more balanced than in previous years, more centrist than in many years. And that meant no representation in the national organizations by Otzma Yehudit, Ben Gvir's political party. On Wednesday afternoon, we were asked to begin voting early, a day early, so that the conference could end a day early. We needed to end because of the Haredi ultra-Orthodox million-man march, scheduled in Jerusalem to take place on Thursday. I'll return to that scene in a moment. So we began to wind down on Wednesday. We sat in a delegation briefing where we were told that the agreement was about to close, and we only waited for the final details and the public signing to be celebrated. So, after approximately 6 hours of plenary session, 6 hours of sitting together as a Congress, 6 hours of voting on resolutions, it felt outrageous and insulting when we began to read headlines on our phones that Likud had submitted the name of Yair Netanyahu as a board member to fill a board seat and receive a sizable salary for the next 5 years. For the liberal bloc of the Congress, that was a step too far, and we refused to participate in signing any agreement that evening. Even as the final votes occurred, it became clear that the Congress could not conclude since there would not be a coalition agreement. We would not sign an agreement placing Yair Netanyahu in any position of power. So, I am still serving on the 39th World Zionist Congress that has not yet concluded. And the final coalition agreement vote will occur digitally. I was informed that we would receive an update on Sunday morning. What kind of theater is this, one might ask? The most beautiful kind. In this theater, we were able to reject extremism in favor of compromise. We were able to block nepotism in favor of meritocracy. We were able to do that which seems impossible for many liberal democracies around the world today. For Zionism, nothing should be considered impossible. As Herzl told us, Im tirtzu ein zo agada, if you will it, it will not be a dream. What kind of theater is this, the cynic might ask? The most meaningful kind, this rabbi would answer. From time to time, we need to remind ourselves about the Jewish and democratic nature of Zionism. We need to remind ourselves that we endured thousands of years of precarious diaspora and powerlessness in the Promised Land before the advent of liberal democratic ideals of the Enlightenment nationalist movements. Had any of us decided to build another form of government, it would never have engendered the widespread, broad support we needed to realize our 2,000-year-old dream. On the trip, flying to Israel, I read a book called The End of History and the Last Man by Francis Fukuyama. His central argument is that history hasn't ended in the sense that events have stopped occurring, but rather, history has ended since we have evolved as a collective humanity to realize the most just form government that holds the most promise for the most citizens, and that is liberal democracy. While authoritarianism rears its ugly head from time to time, and people have a tendency to look in the rearview mirror and consider failed, dangerous Marxist practices, the end of the rainbow of history, of our evolution as people and as citizens, is liberal democracy. Any threat to fairness, any compromise on classical liberalism is a step backwards. Reading the book prompted me to consider whether or not the end of Jewish history is Zionism. Again, in Fukuyama's sense, events will continue to unfold, thank God, for our people. But the idea that we evolved from nomads to monarchical kingdom to dispersed diaspora to Zionist democracy, perhaps it's time to wonder aloud if Zionist Congress, the Jewish democracy, if that's the dream we've always dreamt from the beginning. It allows us to be strong and autonomous and provide welfare and support for those of us who need it. It has given birth to a moral Israel Defense Force and a celebratory startup nation. All of this is the result of the efforts of all, a meritocracy for all, a liberal democracy in the classic sense for all. Yet the reason that the Congress had to be ended a day early is because the Haredi community decided to converge on Jerusalem and protest in front of the hall in which the Congress was held. They warned us from the podium at the Congress that Jerusalem would certainly be closed down. The freeway entrance to Jerusalem would be sealed. Trains would not be allowed to enter and exit the city after 12 noon. So we all attended our farewell in-person delegation meeting at breakfast, expressed gratitude for one another for the experience and for our Israeli professionals. And those of us who had flights on Thursday dashed in different directions out of the city. For the first time in my life, after dozens of trips to Israel, I fled the city of Jerusalem. I've never fled because of a foreign attack. I've never fled because of ballistic missiles. But because of the threat of an internal destructive protest that would paralyze the city, I left. The leaders of the Congress warned and warned and warned that they had no idea if we would make it out in time for flights on Thursday night. As we drove in our cab to the central train station on Thursday morning in Jerusalem, we passed new signs new signs being hung around the city that asked for people to throw out their trash, signs to encourage people to respect public property, and requested people to be safe and not climb on construction equipment. Police arrived and began to take positions in the early morning hours. And as we descended down the escalator to our train out of Jerusalem, the escalator up was filled with bachers, with young Haredi men, all escalating into the city. Every train platform that we passed on our way from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv was filled with Haredim waiting to board trains into Jerusalem. Reportedly, hundreds of thousands of ultra-Orthodox men entered Jerusalem to protest the draft bill, to protest any sense of responsibility they carry for the Jewish state in which they live. Let me be very clear. They have every right to protest. Every group in Israel has every right to protest. And they also, as Jews, have every responsibility to act like decent, responsible Israeli citizens and human beings. They clashed with police from the moment they stepped off the trains. They trashed the city that we love. And a teen unfortunately climbed up construction equipment and plummeted to his own death. They acted with reckless empowerment and filled the streets of our holy city with absolute disrespect. I believe that the heads of the yeshivas, of all of those students, the Rosh Yeshivas who stoke these fires for their own personal gains, including influence and job security, they should be brought to justice and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And Zionism in Israel of the 20th and 21st centuries reveal the collective evolution of our people through our history. To think that there's a significant population that prefers to dress and behave like we should look backwards to the 18th and 19th centuries is foolish, irresponsible, and it proved to be dangerous, not only on Thursday, but in many, many examples before. Study of Torah and Talmud is commendable. Disconnecting our kids from the internet to some extent, I think, is admirable. Enacting those customs at the expense of responsibility to your neighbor and your country, at the expense of derech eretz, basic decency, is appalling and embarrassing. My criticism of their behavior will not change anything, believe me. But you know who knows better and should say something? My Orthodox colleagues here in America and around the world. In the same way that the American Zionist movement brought together colleagues from Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox communities, in the same way that we could all convene and express opinions on the blessing that is Israel, we should all be able to convene now that the Congress is over and express concern and disdain for the type of behavior we saw on Thursday in Jerusalem. They know that the learning in these yeshivas are inspiring and the social behavior is appalling. These schools might be located in Israel, but they desecrate the honor of all those who contribute to build and rebuild, to sacrifice and protect our only Jewish state. Simply put, their behavior on Thursday defiled the sacred nature of our eternal political and spiritual capital. Precisely now, the Jewish people is faced on many different fronts with the choice of forward or backward. Both here, especially this week, and in Israel. And we're not a monolith. We've never been a monolith. We've never thought completely alike. But the World Zionist Congress showed me that Zionism is the path forward. Zionism is not only our people's problem, it's our people's only path. For Zionism leads us back to liberal democratic values. Zionism leads us back to meritocracy. Zionism leads us back to Zion, clean, quiet, filled with Kodesh, sanctity. It's the place King David arrived 3,000 years ago and demarcated as our eternal capital to unite our people. We need to press our leaders today to unite our people by expending political capital and spiritual campaign, a spiritual courage, leading from the moral middle once again. Any of the delegates in 1897 at the first Zionist Congress in Basel could have asked themselves if they were engaged in theater. How could a group in Switzerland change the course of Jewish history? Abraham could have asked if he was engaging in performance alone. How could one man's journey change the course of human history? Enacting a display of theater or any other kind is sometimes the best way to exhibit our set of values. It's a way to teach others what matters to us. It's a way to say that we can't control everything, but we have to start somewhere. Lech-Lecha, the Parsha this week, teaches us that orienting our lives around Israel is the first Jewish act of the entire Torah. The first commandment to a Jewish person is to go to that place, the land of Israel, and to hold the land of Israel significant in their soul. My experience at the World Zionist Congress isn't as important as my journey that will follow out of that Congress. It will inspire me to continue to proudly identify as a Zionist in public. It will continue to inspire me to stand in solidarity with the state of Israel. And it will continue to inspire me to fight for the values of this community and communities like ours. Continue with the journey that began with Abraham and continued with Herzl and now extends out through us. There was a genius in the original Congress modeling for our people that, like for all peoples on earth, liberal democracy and self-determination was possible for us. There was a strength and conviction in the Chalutzim, the generation of pioneers, taking that model and applying it to our ancestral homeland, that they built the state of Israel. There's a continued wisdom in bringing that model Congress back every 5 years to inspire Zionist delegates from across the world to return and Israelis to convene to re-examine the state of the Zionist movement today. For Lech-Lecha was not only a divine charge to Abraham alone. It's a central commandment, a rallying cry for us all, and it continues today. Am Yisrael Chai. Shabbat Shalom.